Third Laguna Hills Mutual Board of Directors, a California nonprofit mutual benefit corporation. Today is Friday, August 12th, 2022, and it's about 9:30. We are in the boardroom and also on TV6 and virtually via Zoom today. We have a quorum here, and so I'm calling the meeting to order. Purpose of today's meeting is to review the most current version of the Third Mutual 2023 budget, which is version 3. So I'd also like to acknowledge the third members that are here in the room, as well as those watching on TV6 and any who are on Zoom. As well, I'd like to acknowledge any media that might be listening in. It's time to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve today's agenda? Donna moves and Kush seconds. Anybody have any suggested changes to the agenda today? Hearing none. Any objections to approving as is? All right, hearing none, we will consider the agenda approved by consent. All right. For chair remarks, just a few things. I would like to thank my fellow board members as well as staff for all the work they've been diligently putting in the past few months to get us to this version of the budget. As many of you may recall, the initial version that was delivered to us by staff suggested a 5% increase for Third's monthly assessment next year. And since that initial version, there's been great partnership with the board and staff, along with many meetings. And even with the current climate where everything seems to be costing more, by working together, the board and the staff have been able to eliminate close to $28 per manor per month from that first version. And with this version, we're looking at no increase to the Third Mutual portion of our monthly assessment next year. Jose is looking forward to sharing even more background and details about our budget process and how the figures are looking, so I'll leave that to him. But first, we're going to move on to next agenda item, which is the open forum. Okay, so the staff is telling me that there are no open forum requests today, so I won't give my spiel about how long people can talk, and we'll move on to agenda item 8. Jose, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, it's a pleasure to meet with you this morning to review the 2023 business plan. This is our third version of it, and I know that we've gone over it several times, but we'll go over it in some detail, just so those at home listening can kind of see and understand the plan. But first, as President mentioned, I want to go through and give everyone an idea of where we've been and where we come from. So on this particular slide, I know it's small, but I just want to remind everyone that ours is a fairly lengthy budgeting process. We began back in March, and I won't walk you through each of them, but there are a total of 22 official open session meetings between all the mutuals where we meet with board members. We open it up to the public and disclose what's in the budget and also take suggestions. We look at these again and again to make sure to give you the best service that we can at the most reasonable prices. So that's really what we're here to do, is to help out with the assessment and to provide all the service that we can. So again, this is just an effort to let you know that this is, we're rounding the end here. At the conclusion of today's meeting, the next time you'll see the budget, it'll be at your regularly scheduled board meeting in September, and at that point, it'll be up for your adoption. So it'll be good. But let's go through the actual budget itself. Again, want to look back and say that starting back in March, we did a lot of work internally before we even presented anything before you. We had each of our department heads go through and put in, I won't call it a wish list, but all of the expenses that are required to meet your service obligations. And then at that point, staff took all the budgets and compiled them and allocated them and did all of our calculations that we needed to do, and we put a report before the CEO. And at that point, she was able to take a look and sharpened her pencil and really asked staff to go back and reevaluate and see, hey, what can we do better? Where can we make sure that we're getting the best value out of your funds? And so at that point, each of the departments went back and recalculated their budget, re-put in, maybe took a look at some of their staffing and did a lot of changes that way and came back with a much lower budget. And even at that point, the CEO met with the departments again, individual meetings with each department head to make sure that each line item was justified. So there was a lot of work that was done on the staff end of it before we even brought any numbers or figures before the board. And even once we did go through each of the versions and met with the boards, at that point we also met with board members individually afterwards and just kind of got everyone's opinions and thoughts and had a lot of changes. So that's why we have so many iterations of the budget. Ultimately, we all have the same goal in mind, and that, of course, is to provide the most service that we can for you, all the while being very good stewards on your finances. So just wanted to let you know where we were. But even at that, as we're taking a look, there are a couple of things that are outside of staff's control or outside of the village's control here. For example, utilities. As you've heard, as President talked about, there are a lot of rate changes and a lot of changes going on throughout. And so the board, staff, and residents really have taken a collective approach to see what we can do. As an example, on utilities, there have been some state mandates to reduce our watering. So the 2023 budget includes a 30% reduction in irrigation as an example of what we're doing to combat some of these rate increases that we see for utilities. And then just another key assumption, because it has a big influence on us, is the trash. As we know, there are some regulations for trash as well, dealing with recycling, and we have a new service provider, and altogether those costs are very increased. We do have some happy news to report on the water and sewer end. Well, water was a result of our decreasing irrigation, but on the sewer end, El Toro Water District has met together, and they have released the rates for next year, and the sewer rates for residential have decreased quite considerably, and to the point where Third is saving about $400,000. So we were fortunate. But I just want to I want to highlight some of these assumptions that were included in here. TV programming costs, that's really a GRF function, but just to let you know, that's another one of those areas that's a big dollar price. And these TV programming, so your major networks that you see on TV, we enter into 3-year contracts with them, and there are quite a few of them that are going to be coming up for renegotiation in 2023. So there are some hefty rate increases for those. Insurance market, I know that's something that's always the top of mind here with Third, and there have been adverse effects not only in our local area but really throughout the nation that have really driven the price of insurance up collectively throughout the industry. And I want to also talk on the labor market. As we've been talking each and every month at our finance meetings, we're having a hard time filling our open positions. The labor market is tough not only for ourselves, but we see it as well in our vendors. We see it as well as we go out to eat, and you see now hiring, or you see those prices starting to go up. So all those things have an effect on us, and not the least of which is inflation that was just released yesterday or the day before at 8.5% is what we're looking at now. In the face of all of those things, I'm going to go ahead and, as the President mentioned, we're recommending no change for the overall basic assessment for the third portion. GRF did have a minor change of $3.81, but we'll look at all those things. I just wanted to cover some of those key assumptions here. But getting back to wages, so we're in a very difficult predicament in that, as we mentioned, there's a tough labor market out there. And so we asked ourselves, well, what can we do, or what's going on? So we took a look at planned wage adjustments, and as you know, we have both union and non-union positions here. The union are governed by a collective bargaining agreement that expires in November of 2023. It's contracted at a planned wage adjustment of 2%. But what can we do for that non-union? And just to let you know, the assumption is that we're going to have a 5% overall increase there for planned wage adjustments. And let me tell you how we came up with that. We did a wage comparison study. So we contracted with a company whose job it is to take a look at all the different wages across all the different industries. And despite that, we're able to filter and let them tailor the results to us. So we were able to, for example, to specify, to compare our wages against that of other nonprofits. We were also able to focus in on location. So, of course, we chose the Orange County location and also size. So we compared ourselves to those industries in not-for-profit in Orange County with at least 500 employees. And as we did that, we went line item by line item, and again, we reviewed all full-time, non-union positions, excluding the executive team, and we saw that altogether about 69% of your employees are under market. That means that they realistically can go elsewhere and make more money. So what can we do, or what do we do at that point? So on this next slide here, again, we've been talking about inflation. Here's a little chart that compares inflation against planned wage adjustments, or budgeted wage increases, I should say. So the dark line here is the budgeted increase. The orange line is the CPI. So anytime that green line is, so in other words, the budgeted increase is over the orange line, your employees are getting more purchasing power. Their dollars are stretching further. They're outpacing inflation. But as of late, anytime that orange line is over that green line, your employees' pay is actually decreasing. Their dollars aren't able to buy as many goods. So that's, again, the question that we're left to ourselves. What can we do? Would it be fair to say, hey, let's keep up with inflation and give everyone a 9%? We wouldn't think that would be very good stewards of your money either. So our assumption here for 2023 is a 5% pool. That doesn't mean that every employee is going to get 5%. Of course, we're going to be taking a look to see how everyone is fulfilling their job. We're going to be doing evaluations and those kinds of things, but that would be the pool that's available to them. So again, what does that mean for third? I'm happy to report, as the President mentioned, that the third basic assessment is remaining unchanged from 2022 to 2023. You can see a little bit of history there. However, every member of third is also a member of GRF, so this is a more realistic, because this is what you end up writing a check for. Including GRF, it's going to increase $3.81, so about 0.5% altogether. Again, third portion is zero. Also want to talk for a quick minute about staffing. Overall staffing, this is community of shared resources. Overall in the last 10 years has decreased. It's accurate, but it's a little bit of a misnomer. There are some positions that have been outsourced, for example, lifeguards. We still have lifeguards, but back in 2014, we employed them directly. Now we're using an outside service to provide them. So I'm providing this because this is a question that I'm often asked, how many full-time equivalents that we have. But what I do want to focus on is between 2022 and 2023, there was a total change of 1.78. We increased 1.78. And the reason that we did that is because we have two particular positions, customer service positions, that were previously authorized, that are already hired, that are already on staff. And the purpose of these positions is to deal with incoming calls. And we've seen that with the addition of these positions, we have lower abandon rates, lower hold times, and higher answer rates. So with the improved metrics, we thought it was very justified, and our CEO decided to let those two slip on in. No, she was very judicious about what we were going to put in there, but that was a very good use of your funds and resources. So wanted to make you aware of that. Another thing that we did from the full-time equivalent thing perspective is that we started instituting a vacancy factor. And what I mean by that is that our budgets include authorized positions of 735.97 full-time equivalents. However, we're only seeking funding, we're only seeking funding of 711, and the other 24 and a half positions are a vacancy factor. We realize that as positions become open, there's oftentimes a gap, or there's some time that it's taking us to recruit. As I mentioned, our market is very difficult. So we have some of that time that goes unfilled. So what are we to do? We definitely want to hire up to those levels, that 735, but there's no reason to pass on those assessments. So we've included this factor to where what you'll see today includes only funding for 711. We're still seeing some of the results from COVID, the face of the employees is changing, and how that is happening is still being evaluated. So next year, as that starts to calm down, we're going to really evaluate and see which of those positions should be continued on for future years. So that is our commitment to you, is that we'll continue to evaluate that. The good news again is that we're funding 711. So you'll see that is one of the reasons that we were able to keep your assessments stable. So that's pretty good. And as President mentioned, when we originally provided version 1, the third line from the bottom, the third basic assessment was $587.55. Since then, we've partnered with the boards and staff, and we were able to reduce that to $559.62, a decrease of $27. GRF also had some significant changes. Normally, I put in a slide in here to show the changes between the most recent version, which is version 2 to version 3. There were none, but I want to bring to everyone's attention that, again, we've been working hard all together. We've been partnering to come about that. So this is some really good news I wanted to share here with you. So on this next slide, here's the chart that we're going to be coming back to repeatedly. And this is, I'll draw your eye to the bottom line here. The total basic assessment is going to increase $3.81. Again, the third portion is going to remain flat. GRF increased $3.81. And we'll go over each of those now. We have one quick slide here. Also, third has some units that have surcharges. So, for example, if you're in a unit that has an elevator or that has a laundry, there may be some surcharges here for you. I take that back, sorry. It's elevators exclusively and garden villa. You'll see that those laundry charges, there are no changes from year over year. So my corrections there. But those items... So if you live in a unit that has an elevator or a garden villa, there is an additional fee associated with the maintenance of both of those items. And you can see them there on your screen. The elevator is going to increase 88 cents, and the garden villa rec room folks are going to increase by 25 cents. But again, getting back to the business plan here, we're going to go over each of these items fairly quickly, beginning with revenue. I have just a quick pie chart here to let you know that we do take in third plans for a little bit over $2 million in revenue, and that benefits you because that equates to about $27.83 per manor per month. The majority are going to be chargeable services, but I'm more of a chart guy, so here are those same numbers by chart. And you'll see that top line fees and charges, this is the number of chargeable services. We've taken a look at history and have seen that your chargeable services have been increasing. So you're going to expect to see more revenue here. This is a pass-through, so you'll see an offset in our expense. But I want to make you aware that is happening. There is no change to laundry, but I do want to point out that that's $210,000. And this general category called miscellaneous, this you're going to see additional revenue in here of about $70,000. And what we've seen is that in the first half of 2022, leasing volume has continued to increase. And we do anticipate that lease processing fee to continue to increase. So that's what you can count on there, about $70,000 in extra revenue. So moving on over to expenditures. This, of course, is going to be your largest category. Here's a pie chart to remind us that for third, the majority of your expenses can be found in employee compensation related, insurance, and utilities. Again, we'll take a look at this in chart form. We're going to start with in order of magnitude, and we'll talk about compensation. As we talked about, there have been significant changes in planned wage adjustments, so you'll see that $174,000 has increased there, but you were benefited by that vacancy factor, which is why you don't see that being as high as you would anticipate, given that you have over $11 million in compensation. I also want to bring to your attention there's been a couple of changes in allocation, specifically in compliance. Formerly, you were charged as 3% of their time. Most of it was paid out of GRF, but we re-evaluated that and took a look at where their time was spent and are now splitting that more evenly between the mutuals, since that's the majority of compliance has to do with mutual work. Moving on to insurance. Insurance, I'm happy to report, is going to be a decreased budget of about $126,000. And as we know, the insurance budget is set for approximately $675 million of coverage. We took a look and just had a renewal at the June renewal date, and it came back better than we had anticipated. So we're just passing on those savings there. So altogether, you'll see a $126,000 reduction coming from insurance. I will also point out that the hazard and liability insurance, those premiums had a normal increase, so you'll see a little bit of an offset there. But altogether, insurance is planned to decrease by about $126,000. Utilities, we talked about trash coming in higher than we expected, and we were very happily surprised with those sewer rates. So those essentially offset, but I will give you some general numbers here. Trash increased $403,000 with the requirement for recycling and those kinds of things. We were very fortunate to have sewer decrease by $334,000 due to the new sewer rates, and because of your willingness to comply with water reduction standards, that is a decrease of $86,000. So altogether, utilities are roughly flat, but there has been a lot of movement within there. So I wanted to bring those items to your attention. And the next biggest item here is outside services for about $1.3 million. And you see an increase here of $350,000. The majority of that is going to be from fumigation and related expenses. We're anticipating doing more buildings in 2023, about $186,000. And earlier I talked about chargeable services. The chargeable service expense is here on this line, so you see about $130,000 extra. Again, you saw the offset in revenue. We have to show it on both sides. These pesky accountants keep us on our toes, but we show both revenue and expenses, and here is the expense portion of that. So altogether, there's a $350,000 increase. Some of the smaller expense categories you can see on your screen. Net allocations to mutual. This is as GRF's expenses go up and down, you'll see minor changes here, so about fairly even here. We have an other category that is increased by $6,000. There's a lot that goes in there, but I'll give you the major change. It's going to be the elevator. Your elevator contract is increasing slightly, so that's the change here. Materials and supplies, we're happy to report a decrease, and this is going to be primarily a result of, again, some litigation that has taken place. Your handheld landscaping equipment, so your blowers, your edgers, and those kinds of things are going to go, they're going to need to be replaced with electric versions of them. And since we're going to do those in mass, we're going to take those out of a capital budget, so we don't need a budget for them in your materials and supplies, and so that's why the decrease here. And lastly is legal fees. The boards have been doing a very good job at keeping tabs on what's being sent out to legal for opinions and those kinds of things. So we're happy to report that there is going to be, the trend is that there's decreased legal fees. So we were able to decrease the budget by $134,000. The next portion of your budget deals with reserve contributions. The reserve contributions altogether, we're recommending a $9 per manor per month increase, and we'll talk about those. I'll start by saying that Third had contracted a reserve study. So a reserve specialist came on site to evaluate those items for which you have responsibility to repair or maintain for the next 30 years. They do this once every 3 years where they come on site to do so, and we were able to have them on site this year. They were able to take a look at everything and ultimately recommended a $9 increase. This is the report that they put together, and I'll just walk you through it very quickly here. The purpose of a reserve study is A, to make sure that you're going to have sufficient funds to meet your reserve needs, and B, to give you an idea of what kind of risk you're at for a special assessment. They use the chart here that's on the bottom of your screen. They call less than 30% funded being at a high risk, between 30 and 70 being a medium, and over 70 being at a low risk. But I will say that this is the same metric that is used on small HOAs from any number of units to the really large HOAs. I'm happy to report that we have about $20 million in reserves currently, or that's what we're projecting to begin 2023 with. So we're standing at a pretty good place. That being said, we need to continue to contribute to our reserves to make sure that that is still always the case. So I'll break down on this second slide here. Here is the reserve specialist 30 years. This is a requirement by law that we're supposed to provide a 30 years. And there in that yellow and red bar, you can see that if we continue at the pace that we're contributing, we anticipate spending down the percentage of reserves. However, of course, this is over the next 30 years, and we'll be making adjustments as we seem fit. I will also point you to that very first column. That's the starting balance, so you can see that there is a plan to keep you, at no point do you go any lower than $8 million over the next 30 years. But again, this is fairly theoretical in practice. We have to do this per law requirements, but it is something that we're obviously monitoring and taking a look at. But again, for this year, this is our recommendation here. On this chart, you can see several years of actuals and plan. I'll break that down per matter per month here over the next couple of slides. But again, this is $161 or a $9 increase compared to last year. So here is a 5-year. For internal purposes, we think 5 years is a little bit an easier look. I think it's easier for us to plan over the next 5 years versus the next 30. But you can take a look here. Last year, the contribution for the replacement fund was $146. And we recommend it to go up to $154. And you can see your ending balances there on the right-hand side. They are starting to come up, but again, as your infrastructure ages, there are future expenses to come up. We'll take a look at the same type of chart for elevator. And the elevator is one of those where it's fairly lumpy. When you do have to replace an elevator, it can become very costly. And so we're building up those balances for the eventual replacement when those come up as well. And lastly, laundry. And the same goes for laundry. In 2019, all of the laundry dryers were replaced. So even though you don't see very many expenditures over the next little bit, when they start failing, they're going to probably fail fairly collectively. Again, they're only a couple of years old now, but ultimately we'll have to plan for their eventual replacement there. The last section, I should say, is restricted contributions. And ultimately, we recommend a reduction here of $9.48. The restricted contributions are comprised of two funds. One is the unappropriated expenditures fund, and one is the disaster fund. For the unappropriated expenditures fund, last year there was no contribution. We believe that it is prudent to continue with no contribution. And let me pause by saying that the first funds that we looked at were reserve funds. Those are required by law that you plan for any expenditures that you might need over the next 30 years. These are restricted in that they're nice to have. They're your savings account. They're your contingency type funds, money to have in case of a disaster, or any money to have for major items not otherwise identified in the business plans. But getting back to this unappropriated expenditures fund, I wanted to show you some history as far as where the fund balance for this particular fund has been. It's been in the 2 and 3 and maybe even peaking up to the $4 million range. We did a couple of projections here over the next couple of years, and we believe that even with no contribution, that this fund will end at over $3 million over the next couple of years. Here are our projections for 2022 and 2023. You see the beginning balance there. This fund typically averages about $400,000 in expense on a year-to-year basis. And this is also the fund that we net any operating surplus or deficits on. In 2022, in fact, at your next board meeting, we're going to be putting forth before you a resolution to transfer over the deficit from 2021 to be paid out of this fund. It's already included, it's already budgeted, as you can see here. We're happy to report that we do project a surplus in the current year, and that is currently $1.25 million, 1.256, as you can see there. So again, we're going to next year come before you and recommend that that gets transferred into this fund. So again, we believe that this fund will end at over $3 million, and consequently, there is no need for a contribution. And here is the 5-year on this as well. Since there is no defined usage of the fund, we went with averages. On average, you spend about $400,000 out of this fund. Similarly, we took a look at the disaster fund, took a look at some history there. Again, $7, $8, $9 million is what has historically been there, and we took a look at some projections. Let's go over those projections as well. In this particular fund, we do plan to deal with moisture intrusion events. The moisture intrusion event, there's two parts to a moisture intrusion event when there's a leak, for example, on a wall. First of all, we have to do the cleanup. We have to clean up anything that has gone bad, and then we have to get into the wall and fix whatever caused the initial problem. The fix, if you will, the construction portion is funded out of our reserves, since that's going to improve your infrastructure, extend the life, and those kinds of things. And the cleanup portion is funded out of this fund, this disaster fund. So historically, that's been at about $1 million, and that's where you can see the expenses. So the projection for 2022 and the projection for 2023 primarily have to do with those moisture intrusion cleanup events. So again, you can see your beginning balance, you can see the current contribution, because this is one that you're currently contributing to, and the contribution that we recommend for next year are all on your screen. And once you do the math here, we do project that this fund will end at about $6 million. So we think that it's prudent that you decrease your contribution. We wouldn't recommend eliminating it, as there are ongoing expenditures here. On this next chart, you can kind of take a look at a 5-year. We've historically been at a $25 contribution, so that's what we put in there for future years. Of course, that's nothing you're committing to today, but wanted to give you an idea of where this fund is or where it's going in the future. But for the current year, we think that $12.26 is prudent to put in there to maintain these things going forward. And the last chart here is just a chart that does the same thing, does a 5-year look for the surcharge fund, the Garden Villa Rec Room Fund. Again, not everyone contributes, only those members in Garden Villa. We have presented this to the Garden Villa Association. But overall, they are maintaining their ending balance at about $120,000. Going forward, we anticipate another 25-cent increase next year and in 2024, but probably not after that. But wanted to share that with you. So again, we'll come back to this slide. We're very happy to report that third basic assessment, through a lot of collaboration, has come in at no change from last year, including GRF's basic assessment of $3.81. The total per manor per month will be $780.93. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions.
Okay, Annie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple of questions. One is probably, let's see, slide number 7, 6 and 7. Because I do believe that, we put a lot into all of the resources, and my thinking is our human resources are probably our best asset. And I see that we are planning a wage adjustment of 5%, but only for the ones who are up to par. And so, and like I said, this is probably more of a Siobhan question than anything else. And so how do we, I know we can't budget for this, but my concern is not paying staff enough and creating a void, and then just creating a cycle of not having staff and not giving them a raise. So then they leave. So is there budgeting, what do we do with that in terms of budget?
We have been challenged by the VMS board to try to achieve savings that we can then earmark to bring some of these positions up in priority order to market rates. So for instance, if employee health insurance, if we're able to come up with an innovative solution there and save a certain amount of funding in 2023, we can use that funding to bring employees up to closer to market rates. And again, we'll do this on a priority basis, depending on those positions that we're having the most difficulty filling or that are the highest priority to the organization.
Okay, thank you. And then yes, it did. And I had one other question, and it had to do with the elevators. So is there, and this probably would be for Bart or somebody, is there a plan for completely replacing an elevator? If we had to replace an elevator tomorrow, we have the money budgeted for that. And in this elevator fund that we have, how do we prioritize elevator replacements? Does that make sense?
Thank you. So with the program that we have where we do preventive maintenance, we attempt to extend the life expectancy of those elevators. Should any of them fail, this fund will be tapped into, and we will go out to bid to get those replaced. There should be sufficient funding to address a single elevator that may need replacement at this time.
Okay, I think that answers my question. So if I go over to a Garden Villa building today and then all of a sudden the elevator stops working, there's been preventative maintenance done on that elevator, and it's been evaluated and determined that it doesn't need to be completely replaced, it just needs to be repaired in some way.
Correct. We extend the life of those elevators as long as we can until it reaches a point when it is no longer feasible to repair, and at that time is when we replace them.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bart. Jim had a question?
Yeah, if I understand correctly, when you said about the wages compared to market, you excluded executive staff. Do we have any statistics on the executive staff wages?
No.
We did not include it in the study. We can certainly take a look at that if that is of interest to the boards.
Thanks. Thanks. Donna?
Yes, I have a question on slide number 23, and it's one that has come up from our members, so I just wanted to move it forward. In terms of our risk for a special assessment, which people are always concerned about as they hear about other communities having them, and our, where we're placed on that risk chart, I have heard that the assessments that are done or the evaluations that are done, some of that risk is if you didn't do the kind of maintenance that we do. That if you deferred maintenance, your risk is obviously much higher than if you continue maintenance, as we just heard, for the elevators. And we are maintaining our facilities. So when we're looking at this chart and where we place on that risk scale, I hear people saying, oh my goodness, we're in terrible shape, And is it in fact that we maintain our facilities at a level that helps decrease any risk, and that is not necessarily part of this chart?
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, because this is one of the required disclosures that you'll see in your November mail out. And in addition to that, it's just a little checkbox that prescribed things that we have to send out, but it says, has there been any deferred maintenance? And it's just a little check mark that says no, but that is a huge check mark that we're happily and gleefully able to check. There is no deferred maintenance anywhere in the village, and this is something that's really important.
Yeah, and thank you for clarifying that. And so actually our risk of a special assessment is really lower than one would anticipate based upon standard charts.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Looked like maybe Rosemarie had her hand up, or is it still up? I can't see
Yes,
that.
yes.
Yes, it is still up. Thank you. One of the things when Siobhan responded to the question about wages that she didn't mention, probably because she lived it, is she is constantly, or staff and VMS board is constantly looking at ways of restructuring, just as we restructured in this past and basically eliminated the position of the COO. We're constantly looking at ways to restructure departments to make them more effective, which will help us to hopefully save money and be able to pay better salaries for the people who should have salary increases. So I wanted you to remind everyone of that. And the other thing is, as far as legal fees go, not only are you watching your legal fees, but the VMS board is way under budget this year for legal fees, and we're predicting to continue. And a tremendous amount of that has to do with the work of the Human Resource Department and not being involved in as much litigation. And Siobhan, if you have any correction there, I'd throw it in. And the last thing is Jose, and I listen so intently because we're out in the streets all the time, is we have to remind everyone that you're insuring for the max, and therefore you're able to save money. But we're not insuring to the full value as per the CCNRs, but you're doing the third board is doing its best to do the best. And when you speak that, I think it's good to remind the people. And that's all I had, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thanks, Rosemarie. Siobhan, did you have a comment on that?
In terms of legal fees, when I started, and I know when VMS took over from PCM, there were a lot of legacy cases that we had to work through. I'm proud to say that the Human Resources Department has done that. So we really have nothing in the pipeline. I want to knock on wood, but that's very good news for everybody.
Great, thanks. Jim, another question?
Yeah, another question. We're comparing our wages to market, but are we comparing our benefit packages to market? Because isn't some of the attraction here that we have better benefits than a lot of the outside employees even though our wages are lower, our benefit package is better? And do we have any comparison of that?
There's no official comparison to that, but yeah, there's of course a lot of external forces, not the least of which is working with you wonderful people. No, we want to compare all those things. In addition to that, there are other considerations such as the ability to work remotely and those kinds of things. So there's more to the comprehensive package.
And our Human Resources Department, when they interview and get feedback from applicants, and especially when the applicants decide not to come here or they decide to come here, they get an indication of, whether it was a benefit-related decision, either pro or con. So that's always helpful information, and that's passed along.
Thanks.
Is there a possibility that we could get a breakdown of wage percentages versus benefit package percentages?
We'll take a look and see what's available to us, definitely. And this is something that's ongoing. It's not something that we just did once. We continuously evaluate. We're one of the things that we're doing from a human resource perspective is we're having a harder time filling it. Why is that? And we take a look at them as well. This is an ongoing membership that we have to help us to evaluate those things. So we will.
Great. All right. Any, Donna?
Yeah, just one quick one. On slide number 20, under the expenses by category, there's an increase in outside services that you had identified as being primarily related to fumigation. So my question is, are we still catching up from the fumigation that couldn't be done at the beginning of COVID? Or have we changed our schedule in some way? Or is it just the increase in costs general, or a little bit of all of the above? Just was curious as to whether or not that catch-up is still part of the factor.
There are more buildings that are going to be scheduled. There are more buildings in comparison to last year. I'm sure that there is a rate change as well, but there are more buildings.
Thank you.
All right. Any more questions, comments? Kush?
Sure, thank you. On slide 32, we say there is expenses $400,000, At one time you had mentioned what it was. I just want you to remind me what you use that expense for.
Sure, I have a little history here on some of the things that we've used in the past. We've used it for property insurance. We used it for a solar project, 3 building trash chute repairs, the OC fire risk, the shrubs that we need to cut down near those wilderness areas. Just a lot of things not otherwise anticipated. The list goes on, but smaller in nature.
Okay. What was the last thing you said? Trash chute and one after that?
Trash chute repairs, red curb reset implementation.
Okay.
The last thing he had mentioned was specifically the cut back on the back behind the fence to 30 feet.
Fire risk.
Okay, got it.
You got okay. That answer your question, Kush?
Sure.
You
I
good?
just wanted to know this $400,000, what did we use it for?
Sure.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any others? All right, I don't see any on Zoom. So again, thank you, staff, for those of you watching. We've been through many of these meetings before, so we've had a whole lot more questions. Just we're getting down to the end of this process. So again, thanks to staff for listening to us and helping make this as best as we could. We'll now move on to agenda item 9, director's comments. I'm going to start, Ira, with you. Any comments?
None so far, thanks.
Okay, not so far. You better speak now or forever hold your peace for today.
No
All right.
comment.
Okay, Jim, nothing for Jim? Anything for you, John? John, you have any comments? None? Okay, all right, Donna?
Nothing except to thank staff, all of the departments, the board, everybody. It's in the face of 9.1% inflation to hear that we don't have an increase, and yet we still are going to have no deferred maintenance. I mean, it's incredible. And so a big thank you to everybody, including our members who show so much interest and support what we do. Thank you.
Hey, Ralph?
I'll add to the thank you and the compliments to the staff, and other than that, I have no other comment.
Okay, great, thanks. How about you, Annie?
Ditto to the comments that are already made, and also I just appreciate these meetings because every time I attend one, I get a little bit more information, a little bit more enlightening, and now finances is not such a terrifying experience for me now. So thank you, staff, for making it understandable.
Thanks, Annie. How about you, Chris? No comments? Kush?
I will echo most of the comments that my colleagues made, and I want to thank the staff for coming back to us with a really positive experience, and especially to Shawan, who pushed her staff to get to this stage. Thank you, Shawan. Appreciate it.
Jules, I see you're on Zoom. Have any comments?
No, but I just want you to know that I did finally get onto Zoom, and I guess I second Annie's comment about how fearful it is to look at some of these documents. And I guess my comment is, as I just sent you an email, Mark, that I'm wondering whether we'd actually get more information if we broke our board up into small groups that could drill down into isolated areas of finance. Because at this point, most of what goes on, I have no understanding, and I wonder how much control we really have over what's going on. And that's why I think perhaps breaking us up into smaller groups would allow the staff to explain their decisions and our options in a little more detail. But that's just an observation. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Okay, thanks, Jules. Appreciate that. Anybody else on Zoom that wants to talk? Rosemarie, Wei Ming? I'll assume that's no. Any comments from staff?
No, thank you.
I just wanted to thank the board for their excellent cooperation. It's been a privilege to work with you through this budget.
Good. All right.
Ditto.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we will adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for attending and listening and watching. And thanks, staff. Appreciate it.